In this video short, Ira Robbins will explain more of the reasons why he left the police department and began his career investigating the corruption plaguing law enforcement today. From his superiors abusing their power to his co-workers' attitude about the people they were sworn to serve, Ira was disgusted by the lack of oversight and constant hush-hush attitude of the officers in his precinct. Many officers did and still do a great job, but when they ignore the bad apples, with this look the other way mentality, they are just as responsible for what happens as these officers that are taking advantage of the system. Ira has dedicated his life to exposing the corruption, and now it is time for the good officers to stand up as well and bring trust back to the communities. This is Police Misconduct: Why I Left the Police Department Part 2 with Ira Robbins. But first, make sure you click the subscribe button below and the bell so you don't miss any new content from the Archangels of Justice. Click, done.
First, we had a sergeant on the police department. Let's call him Officer Green-Knees, because he used to go up and down the parkways in the city, crawling up on these cars with a man and a woman in the car, and he would peek in there, and if they were in a compromising position or if she had a breast exposed or something, and there was nobody else around, he'd arrest them both for lewd and lascivious conduct in the city, even if nobody saw. And then he would set the bail himself, which was always the maximum of $500 apiece. And then he'd set a court date, and usually they wouldn't show up. And they wouldn't show up because it was too embarrassing. And it was strictly a civil matter. It was a municipal charge where the only thing that these people could receive was a money fine. So he'd impose a fine on them, and then turn around and they'd get a civil record, which is just terrible. It wasn't called for. If they were both enjoying it, why do something like that? That was hideous. And that really started to affect me. And the chief of police contacted everybody, and he said there will be no more lewd and lascivious conduct on the parkway tickets unless there's a valid complaint. And the sergeant was forced to stop, but the chief retired a short period of time later, and the sergeant began to do it again. And the city loved it because they got so much money coming in. He would arrest 6, 8, 10 couples a week at $500 a couple, so you think that was quite a bit of money. I had an altercation with him at one time, and I was in my squad area patrolling on the borderline between my area and the next area. I was squad 5, there was squad 4 in between me, and there was squad 6 further south. And the dispatcher called on the radio that a woman was being sexually assaulted at the rear of a nearby hotel. And he assigned squad 4 and squad 6. It was 4's area, and 6 was to assist him. And I could hear them calling on their walkie-talkies because they were calling from just finishing up a different call about 4 miles away. And by this time, I had already driven about 3 or 4 blocks, and I was pulling into behind the hotel. And I said, "Dispatcher, I'm right there. I'll take the call." And good old Sergeant Green-Knees gets on the radio, and he says, "Squad 5, go back to your area and write parking tickets." That slimy bastard, if you will, didn't care that some woman was possibly being hurt. He just wanted to screw with me. And that started really ticking me off. I was hoping that maybe the woman would get killed or something, so then I could just say this is what happened and listen to the radio, listen to the tape recordings. But this is the crap that you have to put up with when you're on the police department, and people don't understand this. We had another lieutenant, and for the name of identification, let's call him Lieutenant Puscut, because he was rotund, out of shape, couldn't function, couldn't hardly walk. And one time we were in the station just getting ready for roll call, and bang! A big gunshot goes off. We all scramble, we all draw on our guns, we're trying to find out who did it. And here comes the lieutenant out there. He's helping us trying to find out who did it. Well, guess what? The lieutenant was screwing around with his gun and he blew a hole right through the woman's washroom door. And then he took him about 10 minutes before he decided to tell us that he was the one. Eventually, one of us took a target, I won't say who it was, his initials are Ira Robbins, and put it right over the hole, right by the woman's washroom, so he got a bullseye. Posthumously, let's say. He also was as goofy as they came. He thought he knew everything, and he was such a joke, it was unbelievable. How he got to be a lieutenant was just terrible because he was always sucking up to the brass. On this one particular situation, a railroad train from the Milwaukee Road Railroad came through the city, and some guy jumped out in front of the train and I guess committed suicide or did. He was just a mess. The train took a long time to stop, and the individual was ground into pieces. Well, the lieutenant tells me, Robbins, I need you to write a ticket to that individual that's dead for failing to yield to a train. And I looked at him and I said, are you nuts? And he says, I'm telling you to do it. So I wrote the ticket to the guy, a deceased guy. I wrote him a ticket, failing to yield to a train. Well, the chief calls me in the next day and says, what the heck did you do that for? Guy's dead. And I says, well, that's what Lieutenant Puscott told me to do. Well, guess what? Lieutenant Puscott denied it. Unbelievable. These people on the police departments, they're just, in some cases, the worst you could ever find. We had a detective captain, and he was always getting freebies from everything. He was basically intimidating people into giving him things. And one time he asked a couple of the officers to transport his squad car someplace. And when the officers were opening the trunk to make sure everything was in order, guess what? They found the air conditioning, a big air conditioning unit in a box from one of the local stores that sold that stuff. And we confronted the detective captain about it, and he denied everything. He said, I didn't know how it got there. And, they only deny that stuff. And one of the things that you'll see when you're on a police department or anybody that's involved with the police department, and it's really shocking. I remember telling the captain about a major problem we had with one of our officers who had been stealing and taking things for free and harassing women and doing everything. And the captain, he was the patrol captain, put his hands over his ears when I was talking about this. Oh, he says, I don't want to hear that. I don't want to hear that. Because if, in fact, he knew about it, he'd have to do something about it. And I can't tell you how many times that happens. My partner, Sal, and I have discussed it. There are so many issues that they don't want to hear about because of the fact that they'll have to do something about it, that it's pathetic when you try to work under circumstances like that, try to arrest people or seek their help against somebody violating the law or overstepping their bounds, and you've got police officers that are doing the same thing. That is really terrible, and they rub you the wrong way, rub me the wrong way, And I couldn't stand being involved with these people any longer. So I left. If you'll talk to Sal Rastrelli, my partner in Archangels, he will also tell you that the same thing happens to him or happened to him. He saw so much of that crap where they were favoring each other and working against the officers that would try to say something about it or do something about it. It just became a terrible issue that we didn't like it. And we talk about it among ourselves. That's why we do what we do. We don't like these commanders. We don't like police that pretend that they're doing things right. If you say something, well, this guy's going to be convicted. Well, of course he's guilty. No, just because you say he's guilty doesn't make him guilty. And when you see these officers not taking care of families that are in need of protection, when they're writing reports when they're forced to because they didn't take the proper action in the beginning and then they lie in their reports. When you see as much as that as we've seen, it becomes a sore spot, a burr under the saddle blanket of a horse, if you will. And we didn't want to do it. I didn't want to do it anymore. So I told these people that I thought it was hideous. And when I left the police department, I filed a complaint with the Equal Rights Division of the state of Wisconsin, and I alleged that they had committed one violation after the other to citizens, to other officers that stood up, and to me in particular. And they denied it. But see, in Wisconsin, one-party consent for tape recording is legal. And I tape recorded them. Everything I said, I tape recorded. So after they denied it, I turned the tape recordings into the state and got them for not only screwing up with everybody, but for lying. And wouldn't you know, the state considered it a worse thing that they lied than what they did to the citizens. And they turned around and gave me a lot of money when I left the department, and had to have sensitivity classes to hopefully stop this from happening again, which it didn't. As I had my, as I reported in the first video about why I left the police department, I told about the officers that had the chicken and watermelon parties on Dr. Martin Luther King Day. And racism is so blatant, it's hard to tolerate. How do you live with yourself when you see people getting screwed just for who they are and not for what they've done? So thanks everybody for listening. I'll try to publish more in the future. But I thank you, and you have to be concerned. And you'll notice if you've got any friends or relatives that become police officers, you'll see a change in them. They become standoffish. They don't want to talk to citizens about what happened. And they cloak themselves with their buddies because they can talk to each other because they know what they're doing and it's wrong. And you'll see changes in how they operate and how they deal with people. And I don't recommend anybody becoming in law enforcement. You know, I think what I would recommend is that these departments have more rotation from squad assignments, more sensitivity training. I think they have to get away from dark black uniforms and black squad cars and start becoming nice people again and working with the citizens instead of shooting and killing everybody. So that's my philosophy of this stuff. I couldn't stand it being with them anymore, and I left. And all I do right now is expose the lies, the ineptitude, the false reports, and there's so many of them, it's just nonstop. So I thank everybody for listening and hope everybody is well. Bye.
Do you have any thoughts on the subject? Let us know in the comments below or reach out to us on Twitter and Facebook. If you want more content, you can check out our website, archangelsofjustice.com, which is updated weekly. You can also sign up for our monthly newsletter. Thank you for watching this latest entry from Archangels of Justice, and we hope to see you back here soon.